Okay, Sabrina, it's all yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina. So tonight we have with us Sandy DeSimone from Audubon Starr Ranch Sanctuary. Sandy did her doctoral research on coastal sage scrub, which is an endangered shrubland. She also developed the Starr Ranch Field Ecology programs, which is an innovative approach that integrates ecology research and education. She also directed 5 years of research on biology and non-chemical control of a non-native plant species, the artichoke thistle. Since 1997, Starr Ranch seasonal staff have learned how to use a method that has reduced artichoke thistle cover by 95% in a work site after 1 season of non-chemical treatment. Land managers from Ventura to San Diego counties have visited Starr Ranch to hear about land management practices and visit the restoration sites. So we're pretty lucky to have her come to us tonight. Yeah, just a reminder before we start to keep your questions in the chat box, and I'll go through them at the end for a Q&A with Sandy. So with that, everyone, please welcome Sandy.
Come on. Okay, I'm assuming everybody can hear me. Let me know if not. So I see the top's cut off. I'm going to talk about how at Audubon Starr Ranch Sanctuary we protect and promote Southern California wildlands. And as Sabrina said, I'm Sandy DeSimone, and I do direct research, education, and land management. So I work on programs and partnerships. And my husband, Pete DeSimone, is a Starr Ranch manager, and he works on infrastructure, IT, wildlife cams, and he does admin, thank goodness. So our mission is, I can't see the top of the screen. I can't remember what it is.
Just hit the green one.
Do you want me to read it, Sandy?
Yeah.
No,
What? Why can't I
just hit the green one. It says your.
I did. It's not going away.
Right.
Oh, well, our mission is, I don't know what.
And it says our mission is to offer innovative approaches to.
Okay. No, to land, thank you, to land management and environmental education that will influence the way Southern California citizens appreciate, conserve, and manage wildlands. We seek to instill a love of nature through education programs that involve people of all ages in wildlife research, and to provide a model of rigorous, sustainable land management through applied research. So Starr Ranch is a 4,000-acre Audubon preserve in the foothills of the Santa Ana Mountains in southeast Orange County, California. But from 1928 to 1963, this was a 10,000-acre cattle ranch owned by Eugene and Applin Starr. The Starrs passed away within about a year of each other in 1963, and 4,000 acres were donated to National Audubon. And here we are now. This is the Starr Ranch boundary, the way it currently looks. On our west, on your screen left, is continuous suburbia from San Diego. Can you turn that up? San Diego to the south, to Los Angeles to the north. We're getting feedback. And to our east, screen right and south, are 140,000 acres of contiguous wildland, Cleveland National Forest, and a county regional park. So here we are standing on our highest point, looking towards the ocean, red tile roofs everywhere. And in that same spot, turning towards the east, not a sign of civilization. So Starr Ranch protects the unique patchwork of habitats, the mosaics, typical of lower elevations in Southern California. 5 major plant communities, some of which are very rare. 2 Mediterranean climate shrublands, chaparral and coastal sage scrub, oak and riparian woodland, and grassland. So here's kind of what it looks like, these patchwork quilts of habitats. You see these beautiful native grasslands on ancient uplifted river terraces, on either side of the canyon, and in the canyon is riparian woodland, and in the foreground is coastal sage scrub. So I'm going to go through each of these habitats or plant communities briefly and talk a little bit about the wildlife that's associated with them. So first, chaparral. Chaparral is much less drought adapted shrubland community than the other Mediterranean climate shrubland coastal sage scrub. So here you see it in dark green on north facing slopes, which at our latitude receive less intense solar radiation than the adjacent south facing slope, where you find coastal sage scrub, a much more drought adapted plant community. So there you see these really tight patchwork quilt mosaics in this photo. So chaparral is California's most extensive native plant community. It extends into Oregon. The shrubs have leathery leaves and they're 6 to 9 feet tall, so thick you really can't walk through it. And it's adapted to fire if fire isn't too intense or frequent. Coastal sage scrub is a globally endangered shrubland. Its worldwide distribution is in a discontinuous coastal strip from southern into Baja California, northern Baja California, and over 100 rare, threatened, and endangered plant and animal species are associated with coastal sage scrub. So the shrubs of coastal sage scrub have softer leaves and they have kind of a minty smell. Your pants smell really good when you walk through it. A lot of them do anyway. And although the literature says they're 3 to 9 feet tall, it's much easier to walk through. And I'd say they're about a little above waist height. And these shrubs too are adapted to fire if not too intense or frequent. And Starr Ranch protects about 2,000 of our 4,000 acres in coastal sage scrub and about 300 acres of chaparral. So there's on the screen left upper is the federally threatened coastal California gnatcatcher, the emblematic bird of Southern California coastal sage scrub. And their map shows both its distribution, which matches the distribution of coastal sage scrub, southern and in northern Baja California. And I think it sounds kind of like a kitten. And on the right is the California species of special concern, the coastal California gnatcatcher, who's associated with cactus scrub, a subtype of coastal sage scrub. Southern Pacific rattlesnakes are found in the shrublands. Flowering California fuchsia, a subshrub. White sage, one of our shrub species. And Starr Ranch protects about 500 acres of native grasslands. And purple needlegrass, the California state grass, forms a bunch grass matrix with non-native annual grasses between the bunches. And we protect 2 native songbird indicators for us of grassland habitat quality, western meadowlark, and on your right, another California species of special concern, the grasshopper sparrow, that sounds, well, kind of like a grasshopper.
Grasshopper sparrow.
You'd hear a meadowlark in the background. Grassland birds are the fastest declining community in continental North America. In one of our native grasslands in an old agricultural pond during really rainy years, we see spadefoot toads. We protect a 5-mile stretch of 15-mile-long Bell Creek. It flows eventually to the ocean, and it's one of the last remaining pristine streams in Southern California. So we have university and agency researchers who track rare fish, aquatic invertebrates, and even a new species of alga, which was found by Cal State Monterey, I believe, researchers. Mountain lions move through their huge home ranges in our canyons where the creeks flow. Oak woodland, called woodland because the canopy is relatively open compared to forests. And there's one major upland tree species in these woodlands, coast live oak. And then we also have two major riparian corridors where riparian woodlands are found. But acorn woodpeckers are the raucous associate of oak species in oak woodlands, and bobcats. So I'm going to talk about Starr Ranch programs pre-pandemic. We have three major program areas: applied research, land management, and education. And if we're known for anything, we're known for innovation, integration, and sustainability. An example of innovation in land management is strip planting. Here you see how we plant coastal sage shrub in these really strange looking strips, 1 to 2 meters wide, that run along slope contours with unplanted buffers or unplanted areas between the strips. And we pioneered this new type of coastal sage restoration, and it's now used by some of our partners in some of the large Orange County preserves. We use no chemicals, and we do use adaptive management, which I'll describe in a minute. But first, Starr Ranch land management has influenced practice in 200,000 acres of preserved land from Ventura to San Diego counties through visitation and solicited advice. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service calls our project cutting edge, and Dr. Katie Suding, an internationally known restoration ecologist, calls our work groundbreaking. That photo's before a Christmas party. So the heart of our upland work is the Starr Ranch field crew, is the seasonal staff. I'm sorry, I can't see the top. And I hire up to 8 seasonal staff every year, and they're recent college grads from all over the country who live and work at Starr Ranch for 6 to 10 months. And I've hired and mentored about 200 since 1997. So the Starr Ranch field crew is the heart of our upland work, and they do targeted invasive species control, rare habitat restoration, vegetation monitoring, experiments and alternative techniques, and grassland bird monitoring. And we couldn't do our coastal sage upland restoration without restoration assistant Debbie Glay, who collects seeds for our project. So another example of innovation in land management and applied research is our work on hybrid ecosystems, or that means accepting some non-natives in native habitats, which makes some of my colleagues kind of nauseous. And since this is such an unusual approach using hybrid ecosystems, I'm going to give you the backstory. So the Audubon mission is to conserve and restore natural ecosystems, focusing on birds, other wildlife, and their habitats for the benefit of humanity and the Earth's biological diversity. And my goal as Starr Ranch land manager is to protect and restore native habitat for birds and other wildlife. And challenges I meet in reaching that goal are first to restore and monitor our native habitats, coastal sage scrub, needlegrass grassland, riparian woodland, to monitor effects on birds and other wildlife, and non-native species control. Researchers suggested that during initial phases of a new non-native or weed introduction, that managers go for it, remove it, and that relies on early detection. But for established non-native or weed populations, we're advised to assess impacts to biodiversity, ecosystem function, and resilience. But managers need parameters we can measure. I don't have the resources to measure biodiversity or ecosystem functions like nutrient cycling and decomposition, and resilience, or how an ecosystem comes back after a disturbance like fire, requires really large spatial and long time scales to measure. But there was an ecosystem function or dynamic process in this research I thought we could handle, and that was biotic-biotic interactions. For example, habitat provision for observable wildlife. And we can ask, does the established non-native or weed have positive or neutral effects? And if so, accept it into a hybrid ecosystem. There are pretty long technical definitions for these terms, but for our purposes, A hybrid ecosystem is composed of both non-natives, weeds, and natives, whereas the more well-known concept, novel ecosystem, is dominated by weeds, by non-natives, and that's from disturbance. At Starr Ranch, we currently have low human-caused disturbance and stress. Grazing ended in 1963. The last major fire was in 1980. And we have relatively low nitrogen deposition from air pollution. So we consider hybrid, not novel ecosystems. So we can ask, does the established weed, the non-native, have positive or neutral effects on observable wildlife, which for us are songbirds and small mammals? And if so, accept it into a hybrid ecosystem. So why songbirds? Well, they're easily detected, they're readily distinguished to species level, and their data are widely comparable due to standardized field methods. Small mammals can exert strong influence on vegetation patterns in Southern California, but their abundances are highly variable. At Starr Ranch, we do try to take a research-based approach to land management. We use adaptive management. That is, we modify our decisions as we learn about the system we're managing through experiments and monitoring. But the reality of adaptive management for a nonprofit like us are time and money constraints. So we do what we can with what we have. And what we have are 8 seasonal staff, community science volunteers, and we collect quick and dirty data because it's an adaptive management dilemma, how to balance the power and rigor required of good research with efficiency, the need to get the work done, and impacts particularly of experiments. So my solutions are to test alternative strategies, but often with low replication, to monitor basic parameters with a maximum sample size manageable. And I use something I call my ecological intuition, which is informed by the scientific literature and on-site experiments and monitoring. So I'm going to give you an example of what I call hybrid ecosystem decision-making for coastal sage scrub restoration. So in 2001, we began long-term veg monitoring in coastal sage restoration sites a long time ago now. And in 2004, we began wildlife monitoring over a restoration chronosequence, which I'll describe in a minute, and longitudinally over time in matched restoration and natural coastal sage sites. And in 2007, I began applying monitoring data to what I now know was hybrid ecosystem decision-making. So here's some of our monitoring photos from a future coastal sage restoration site. Here it's dominated. I don't think you have this species up there, but it's artichoke thistle, Cynara cardunculus. It's a spiny herbaceous perennial, and this is how it looks dried in the fall during the dry season. And its taproot can extend 6 to 9 feet into the soil. And our research showed that it provides poor habitat for songbirds and small mammals. Over a series of 3 experiments, we learned how to reduce artichoke thistle cover without using chemicals by 95% after 1 season of treatment. So this is the same site on the left, on the right, after the 1 season, at the end of the first season of thistle control. The second season, we began coastal sage scrub restoration with these strange strips. Oh boy, did my colleagues ever make fun of me, that run along slope contours with these unplanted areas between. But then along comes a good rainfall year. And in this case, sagebrush, California sagebrush seedlings have moved into the unplanted areas from the planted shrub strip above. So from the end of the first season of weed control to the end of the 7th season of restoration, the site looks like this. So I can't see it, but I think I know it. Since
1999,
1999,
in 645 or 700 acres.
in 645 of 700 acres targeted, artichoke thistle cover has been reduced by our field crews by 95% after 1 season of treatment. So let's back up a little bit to those unplanted areas between those shrub strips. So our field crews remove the worst non-grass, the forb weeds, mostly thistles, and what's left in those buffers are non-native annual grasses. So about 10 years ago, I asked our field crew to get rid of it, to go for it, to get rid of those annual grasses, and their seed banks are short-lived. So within about 2 years, they were gone. But before we could get coastal sage scrub planted and into that area, a much worse dicot or non-grass species, English plantain, and here you see it dried, erupted out of seed banks. And we put in experiments and we figured out how to control it. But it was my first realization that managers face trade-offs. We risk replacing one weed with a less manageable alternative. So I developed a new strategy based on the fact that controlling annual grasses does mean risking a less manageable dicot, forb, or non-grass weed. And based on the fact from our own research, we know that native shrubs do move into adjacent annual grasslands. So my new strategy was to target the non-native dicot weeds, the forbs, the non-grass invasives, to leave the non-native annual grasses, and to monitor effects on native plants and wildlife. So here's some of our monitoring data for those unplanted buffers between the shrub strips. The y-axis is total native cover, all shrub species, from 3 different sites, site 2, site 3, site 5. These are restoration sites. And the color bars are years of restoration. So first year of coastal sage scrub in the blue and on. And what we found was this nice trend of increasing shrub cover over time in all these sites without our crew doing any non-native annual grass control. So these are data taken over a restoration chronosequence, and that's data taken in one season in sites all around the ranch that were in their first, second, fourth, fifth, and sixth season of coastal sage restoration. The top graph is total native cover, almost all shrub species, which increased from younger to older restoration sites. And the bottom graph is non-native annual grass cover, which showed an overall trend of decreasing from younger to older restoration sites without our crew doing any non-native annual grass control. So over the same chronosequence, we took songbird data using spot mapping. And the top graph is bird species richness, the number of bird species, and the bottom graph is number of individual birds. And both of these parameters showed a really nice, tight increasing trend from younger to older coastal sage restoration sites, with a turnover in older sites to species typical of mature coastal sage scrub, like lazuli bunting. So these data are taken over time in a matched, in the red bars, coastal sage restoration sites, and in the blue bars, a natural, pristine coastal sage scrub site. We're not going to look at the blue bars. The y-axis is number of native small mammal captures, almost all rodents. And the blue bars just show the natural fluctuations in natural coastal sage scrub. But let's look at the red bar starting on screen left in the coastal sage restoration. And we're going to go through time in this site. So here's before weed control began, moving right, artichoke thistle control began, coastal sage scrub restoration begins. And by the 4th season of coastal sage restoration, we see a nice increasing trend in number of native small mammal captures, with a turnover in this later year to species typical of closed canopy coastal sage scrub, like the brush mouse. So we began to ask, what does that say? Why
do native annual grasses?
Why do those non-native annual grasses disappear? How does that happen? So let's take a look first at natural coastal sage scrub patterns and processes, what we know. So I did an analysis of aerial photos of sites on Starr Ranch of shrublands adjacent to grasslands from 1993 back to 1945. And what I found was a trend of shrublands moving into adjacent grasslands. So I looked into the mechanism in this experiment you see depicted here. And we did small mammal live trapping from, on the right, the shrubland, the coastal sage scrub, into the ecotone, the area between shrubland and grassland, that's dubbed the bear zone by researchers because it's mostly bare ground, then into the adjacent grassland. And what we found were higher numbers of small mammals, mostly native rodents and rabbits in the shrubland and in the ecotone than in the adjacent grassland. And down at the bottom, you see results from a cage experiment in the ecotone. And we put out cages that excluded vertebrate herbivores or animals that eat plants. And we found significantly higher grass and forb cover under the cages than in uncaged control plots. So we hypothesized that small mammals were taking shelter in the coastal sage scrub, only venturing out 1 to 3 meters into the ecotone or 3 to 6 feet, eating the delicious grasses and forbs, then running back into the shrubs to avoid predators. And what they do in effect is clear that ecotone to bare ground so that our small seeded, light requiring coastal sage scrub species then move into the grassland as a front. So I realized that natural patterns and processes might be applied to our restoration sites. And after 5 years or more, I began observing what I thought were astonishing bare areas. So in upper screen left, you see a planted shrub strip, a planted shrub strip, and in between non-native annual grasses because the crew removed all those thistles. And then to the right, 8 seasons later, there's the same, believe it or not, there's that upper shrub strip and 3 to 6 foot wide bare area adjacent to it. And farther out, there are those weedy grasses and forbs. On the bottom, in the dry season, now we see planted shrub strip, dried non-native annual grasses between. 5 seasons later, believe it or not, that's the same site, shrub strip, and we didn't make that bare area in between. So I had a great research assistant, Mickey Tang, who's now in a doctoral program at UC Davis, have to brag about her. And so we decided to ask, is there an effect of herbivores on non-native species and buffers? So she did a lot of work. I'm just going to show you the results of an exclosure experiment in which she put cages in unplanted areas, the buffers, between the planted shrub strips. And here you see the cage and the control plots right next to the strip in the bare area, the buffer. And the green bars here in her work are the cages, whoops. And sorry, the green bars are the caged plots and the gray bars are the uncaged control plots. So on the left, she found significantly higher total herbaceous density under cages than in control plots, and significantly higher non-native annual grass density under cages than in control plots. So she left those cages in place for 2 seasons. And then right before she removed the cages, she put a motion triggered video cam in place, a bunch of them. We replicated it. And what she found were that rabbits were taking shelter in those shrubs and coming out, and you can see the outline of the cage, and eating those delicious grasses, and you can see erodium, filary, and non-native forbs. So then we thought, well, if rabbits are eating the green stuff during the day, maybe rodents are eating non-native grass seeds at night. So we put seeds of wild oats and brome grass out on sandpaper, put an LED cam in place, and there you see a native rodent. That's a peromyscus species. We don't know which one. We couldn't identify it from the videos. Came out and started eating the seeds. So we hypothesized, what's this first part?
Mature shrubs. And
Oh,
plant
the
strips.
mature strips, shrubs in planted strips, avoid predators so that rodents, rabbits, and birds in our videos consume non-native grasses, forbs, and their seeds in buffers between strips. And then the native shrubs colonize the resulting bare ground in buffers and fill the site in so it looks like nice normal coastal sage scrub. So my conclusion for coastal sage scrub restoration is because of neutral effects of those non-native annual grasses on wildlife, we accept them, much to the chagrin of my colleagues. But the hybrid ecosystem evolves into a native shrub-dominated system over time, and the mechanism is herbivory by rodents, birds, and rabbits. So a little bit about integration. We integrate our research not only into land management, but also into education. And I call them Starr Ranch field ecology programs. Ecology programs are 1.5 hour programs when kids ages 8 to 13 come out and work alongside our wildlife biologists doing the type of research they do, simulations mostly. And Starr Ranch junior hour biologists on the right are spring and summer programs for 8 to 18-year-olds who do, again, I'm going to show you examples of these research projects with our biologists. So one of our ecology programs is on large mammals, the carnivores, cougars, bobcats, and coyotes. So the biologists train the kids indoors how to recognize carnivore tracks and scat. And then the biologists put out these scent stations that researchers still, I think, actually use. And it's a white powdery gypsum. And there's a rock with a scent lure that attracts the carnivores. So they come by and they leave a track record. And the kids learn what large animals are in the area. And then stream biosurvey, I think, is incredibly cool. It's using these very wonderful, mostly larval forms of terrestrial insects. They're called creek macroinvertebrates that are aquatic. And they have different water pollution tolerances. They're pollution tolerant bugs and pollution intolerant bugs. So there the kids are, they've taken their samples and they just love them. And sometimes we just have fun with aquarium nets and they explore in the creek. So here's some of those creek macroinvertebrates that I was talking about. They're quite amazing. Not life size. What's that say?
Ranch junior biologist one summer.
Okay, so during the summer, we take the kids through 2 3-week sessions that take the kids through my concept of the research project. But the first week, they just get their feet wet, since most of them are kids from the surrounding suburbs and they're not used to wildlands, their feet with what wildlife biologists do. So they trap small mammals, they gather invertebrates, they cool them down and release them back into the wild, and plants, and look at them into our donated microscopes. And they just have fun and explore in the creek. They just love that. And then on Friday, we have what I call evening nature workshops. They bring their families and we have a bat biologist and they go for a truck ride on the ranch. And then we have a t-shirt ceremony. We give them all a Starr Ranch t-shirt. So the second week, they become wildlife biologists each day and ask a different research question. They ask, what do owl diets eat? Gather owl pellets and dissect owl pellets. Even though they do it in school, they still seem to enjoy it. And then we ask a large carnivore question using those scent stations. And we also do a creek macroinvertebrate study with a small question. Is there a difference in those creek bugs and riffles versus pools? And there is. The kids always find a difference. It's really fun. And then on the Friday, they do a Western screech owl survey from our truck. They call it the big red truck, using playback. So we had to come up with simplified language for the scientific method that we teach. And here's what we came up with. There are 4 basic steps. You ask a question, you choose your methods, you get your data, and then you look at your data and think. What's that say?
Well, there's three.
Oh, so during the third week, we spend the full week on a research project, and the kids camp, usually their first experience, for a night. And we've done a water quality, week on water quality. This was a project looking at soil chemistry, ground dwelling invertebrates and small mammals in an artichoke thistle invaded grassland compared with a native grassland. And then we just have fun. That's the big red truck they love to ride in. And some years we have a nice pool in our creek. So deep we had to get them inner tubes. So during 4 consecutive Wednesdays or Saturdays, we work with a lot of homeschoolers. We do Starr Ranch Junior Biologist Spring and do one research project. And this is a year when we did survival on the edge. So the research question was, are bird nests more likely to be predated in habitats close to houses or in habitats farther from houses? You saw we have that very abrupt edge with development on one side and wildlands on the other. It's a classic fragmentation question, edge versus interior. So the biologists bought bird nests from Michael's, and they bought quail eggs, and they wired the nests into shrubs and coastal sage scrub on the edge adjacent to the gated community right next to us, and did the same thing in an interior side away from the houses in coastal sage scrub. And so they wanted to look at the predator. I'll tell you in a minute. That's a quail egg. They wanted to see what the predators were. You can hear the gray fox chewing the egg. So they put a quail egg out in a track plate, so the kids, and a cam, and the kids could see what predators were around. And they were really excited to see this large predator. So we have a teen program for kids ages 14 to 18 to deepen and extend an interest in and a love for nature. And we do wildlife research projects with them, mentored by our biologists. We take them off the ranch to explore the amazing Southern California wildlands, coast, desert, mountains. We had a wildlife biologist for 10 years who was a backpacker, and he loved to take them on trips. And they do Starr Ranch service projects. So here are some of the field trips they took during the 10 years that Scott Gibson was here, the wildlife biologist. That's up the Trend in the San Jacinto Mountains, Catalina Island, Joshua Tree. And he found this amazing swimming hole in the San Mateo Wilderness of Cleveland National Forest. And one of the kids said, "This is the best day of my life." They had so much fun. So this is my husband, Peter. Every spring, you should check out our website for the link to the live streaming bird camps, particularly the world famous Starr Ranch barn owls. People, thousands of people from all over the world watch these barn owls copulate, lay eggs, the eggs hatch, and they feed their young. It's quite amazing. Volunteers help us a lot with our work. In 2014, our biologists trained 10 volunteers who come to the ranch monthly to survey birds, butterflies, and plants of coastal sage scrub and riparian woodlands. And they observe traits that are seasonal to detect possible response to climate change. And they enter their data in a national database. Phenology is observing these seasonal traits over time. And the weed warriors in the right are recruited by our riparian interns. Hundreds of volunteers come and help remove stream bank weeds like here, periwinkle. And for a while, we use volunteers to help us with stream bioassessment. They're collecting the creek aquatic forms, the macroinvertebrates, and they're really hard to identify. And so we started sending them to a professional biologist who could identify them down to species. And there they are collecting from what I'll talk about in a minute, the polluted part of the creek. So there is an area in the creek where development waters come in. And here you see in turquoise, pristine, the north section of Bell Creek. And at a certain point downstream, two creeks from the adjacent gated golf course community, lots of bad chemicals, the runoff flows into Bell Creek. About, let's see, it was in 2011, Peter, after a lot of years of work with hydrologists, engineers, and the adjacent community, had two pumps installed in the development to pump the runoff back into our water districts for recycling. So I'm going to show you an index of biological integrity, or IBI, that measures wetland response to pollution using these macroinvertebrates, Cool Creek bugs. The higher the score, the higher the likelihood of a healthy wetland. So on the y-axis is the IBI score. And up here in the blue is the pristine part, the natural part of Bell Creek, which has stayed in the fair to good region throughout our sampling all these years. It goes up to 2016. And below that, in the very poor to poor, are the areas that receive runoff. And despite the pump installation, we think we understand why. We also, our biologists also in the spring do aquatic vertebrate monitoring for some of our vertebrates, such as tadpoles of our wonderful little tree frogs, California newts found in some parts of the creek, and arroyo chubs, chub, a species that CDFW fish biologist is watching, a species of special concern. And to continue to provide habitat for these vertebrates, we need to have perennial water. So at the end of the dry season, the biologists do monitor the perennial water in Bell Creek to make sure everything is cool for the vertebrates. Starr Ranch Bird Observatory avian monitoring is integrated into education programs that stimulate an interest in birds and conservation of bird habitats. If you don't know the lazuli bunting, I have a feeling you do. That's the male and female. In March, we offer beginning and advanced bird banding workshops to recruit volunteers to help our seasonal ornithologists. And since 1999, we've partnered with the Institute for Bird Populations to do breeding season monitoring using bird banding of neotropical migrants. These are songbirds that migrate from North America into the tropics, and their numbers are declining. And 3 of these volunteers who started in 1999 are still with us. And then in 2005, we started in partnership with IBP, monitoring overwintering survival. It was important for them to know what's happening on the wintering grounds of these neotropical migrants. And so we use bird banding. And of course, that's a butterbutt, yellow rumped warbler. So I'm not going to go through this, but we not only send our data to Institute for Bird Populations, but we also summarize the data to understand trends on Starr Ranch. And I wanted to honor the big 6 volunteer bird banders who've been with us since we started for 15 years or more. Our seasonal ornithologists are busy in the spring. They monitor birds in our rare habitats and also hawks and owls with raptor biologist Pete Bloom in Bell Canyon. And this is just an example of how we summarize the data. These are territories of the federally threatened coastal California gnatcatcher that we're monitoring and watching. So a little bit about sustainability. We're sustainable in that we're cost effective. I hire the wonderful seasonal staff who live on site in private rooms, and I feel I can then offer them a California minimum wage since they don't have to pay for housing. And we're sustainable because we don't use any herbicides, no chemicals. So I'll finish up with partnerships. New environmental challenges in the Southern California region rely on collaboration with land managers, researchers, agencies, universities, and educators to promote conservation and protect people in rare habitats. So these are some of our partnerships. I started a group called South County Land Stewards of adjacent land managers. And with a partner, we run the South County Fire Watch, volunteers who serve as lookouts and deterrents during red flag warnings in the fall when Santa Ana winds blow that drive our fires in Southern California. And Cal State Fullerton professors for years have brought undergrad researchers out, and they really do some fabulous mentored research projects. This partnership is a fire prevention group in Orange County. It's an amazing group that started in 2009, 30 to 40 stakeholders. And we developed together a community wildfire protection plan, and we lobby for legislation in the state that recognizes the huge difference between fire behavior in shrublands compared to woodlands and forests farther north. We want to thank Google Irvine volunteers who came out to remove wooden siding on a historic building so it could be replaced by cement siding that's fireproof and acorn woodpecker proof. So we thank James Hardy Company for donating the cement siding. And in 2017, we had the first and only in-person meeting of a group that usually meets by conference call, the SoCal Emerging Tree Pests Working Group, Tree Pests and Diseases. In 2003, they were first observed in Southern California, and they've spread to Orange, San Diego, Riverside, San Bernardino, Ventura, you may know about them, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo counties. They're borer beetles, and they carry disease in their jaws. There are well over 60 host species for at least the shot-hole borer, and drought-weakened trees increase this hazard. One thing you can do to help is to buy firewood if you use it where you burn it nearby, because this is the most important way that these bad beetles spread, through movement of firewood. To learn more about these tree pests, there's a wonderful website that the UC Agricultural and Natural Resources group runs, and there's the URL. Lots of ways you can volunteer and help, and ID tools. It's an excellent website. So I'm going to finish with some wonderful landscape photos of Starr Ranch by the former wildlife biologist Scott Gibson. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandy. We have a few questions in the chat whenever you're ready to get the Q&A started.
Share screen,
What?
upper right, red, stop sharing. Yeah. Screen, there you go.
Okay, so our first question is, how long did it take for the land to start to recover from the cattle grazing?
I wasn't here, but we didn't come till 1985. It was released from grazing in 1963. I do know that a professor who was out here from Cal State's Fullerton at the very near the time of grazing, and then came out when I was first here in the late 80s, couldn't believe that he could find the bunch grass, the native bunch grass, purple needlegrass. So my best guess is that it took a while, but there is good recovery. It's hard to sustain native grasslands in semi-arid Southern California. They require a little more moisture than we have, and our data, lots of data that we have shows that these native grasslands look the best with the highest density and cover of native bunch grass after a really, there's a lag, a year after a really good rainfall year.
Gotcha. All right, let's see the next one. What sort of facilities do you have on the ranch? Very cool that you can give interns a place to live during the summer.
Yeah, it's thanks to the Starr family. The buildings were built in the 1930s, so they're historic for Southern California. There are 12 structures. I think they're really beautiful. Although we live in the former cookhouse for the Cowboys, and one of the kids who kind of was really hot during junior biologist, I brought her over to our porch to sit, and she saw our house, and she said, "What a dump!" That she just isn't used to old buildings in Southern California. But so the main house where the field crew, upland field crew stays, is the lodge-like building where the Starrs used to stay, and it has redwood. You know, they don't build buildings like this anymore. Redwood interior, high beam wooden ceilings, a big stone fireplace, and then there's a former ranch manager's home, which is now our field supervisor has his office, and we have our education room, and there's a bunkhouse where our riparian interns stayed, the former cowboy bunkhouse, and we live next door in the former cowboy cookhouse. Then there's a field lab that was a pig building or something outbuilding. So it was wonderful for us, absolutely wonderful. And Peter's really good at renovating buildings, and so it was lucky.
That's awesome. Really cool. The next one's my question. I was wondering, how does the Firewatch volunteer group operate? Do they just monitor trail cams, or what do they have to do?
No. We solicit volunteers, online recruit now, and there's something called volunteermatch.com and all different ways to recruit volunteers. And then the partner, Laura Eisenberg of Rancho Mission Viejo Land Trust, and I've run it since 2009. One of the firefighters from Orange County Fire Authority, they have an education room next to their firehouse, and they train the volunteers, and they serve as lookouts and deterrents during red flag warnings in the fall when those Santa Ana wind blows. I don't think you get Santa winds, or do you, in Ventura County in the fall?
Santa Ana winds? Yeah,
You
definitely.
get them? Yeah, so I mean, those 45
Yes.
mile an hour winds up to really high winds, up to 70 miles per hour, and they drive those fires. And so these people are wonderful. We have 6 lookout locations that are around our 2 preserves in South Orange County. And we have where they understand what to do. They have a script, a 911 script if there's an emergency, because they'll be so nervous to, give GPS lat long for where the fire is. And they serve as lookouts and deterrents because they wear Firewatch vests. 99% of all the fires in California are human caused. So arson is huge. Of course, power lines, and we're also dealing with that with SoCal Edison. But yeah, the Firewatch volunteers are absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm gonna have to look and see if we have any groups like that in our area, because that's really cool. So we have one more question, and it's from Cynthia. She asked, are you seeing any changes to the bird populations in recent years, thinking climate change, drought?
Yes, we haven't had a seasonal. I had to, when COVID hit in 1920, we had to stop having volunteers, and that's when the bird stuff stopped. But we were watching trends, and we were starting to see some disturbing, I didn't go through the data that I showed you with you, but declining trends in number of bird species. There was some bird species that the volunteers had captured for years that we weren't seeing anymore at the banding station. The raptor population seemed really healthy. We monitored them for years, and well, actually, Pete Bloom thought that the raptor biologists thought there'd been kind of a 30% decline actually Actually, I'm just thinking of what I hear and see, but, from the data, there was some decline. So yes, unfortunately, we are seeing very slow but detectable shifts in bird populations.
Yeah, thank you. That was the last question.
Well, it was fun.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
thank you so much. That was an awesome presentation. I hope to visit your sanctuary sometime.
You are welcome.
Yeah, maybe we could do a Ventura road trip and come as a group and visit. I think that would be really interesting and fun.
What was
That would
that
be
for your
really
4-hour drive?
Yeah, it's 120 miles. Yeah.
I love Ventura County. I love South Orange County. I love Starr Ranch, but both Peter and I really love Ventura County.
I have a couple questions, but I thought I'd just open it up. If anyone wants to just pop in and just verbally ask a question, let's just open the floor for that. Okay. So I'm just really curious in listening to you. There's such a long history of Starr Ranch, and it's been an Audubon sanctuary for a while. So I'm guessing that a lot of this development has grown up around the ranch since it became Audubon property.
Yes.
I think, yeah, that would be very interesting just to see those changes. And
Well, that was our edge versus interior work, looking at the difference, at the edge adjacent to that gated community, golf course community, to our north and west, compare with interior. And we had researchers, mostly graduate researchers from UC Irvine, UC Riverside, and UC San Diego, who were looking at small mammals, edge versus interior, large mammals, ground dwelling invertebrates. So there was a lot of researcher interest a while back. Herps, that they had put herp arrays in at the fragmentation question, the effects of development on the wildlife. So that was really fun time. It was in the late 90s.
yeah, when was the golf course put in?
Started building in 87.
Started building it in 1987.
Okay, all right, so that's like fairly recent history.
That's been a huge challenge that land managers everywhere are now facing in these management mosaics, urban wildland mixtures everywhere. And it's been a challenge working with the gated community adjacent to us. And we try. We have some really good neighbors, and then we have some people who just don't understand what we do. So
yeah, I can imagine, but how fortuitous that this property came into the hands of Audubon at that time, and in this area that just became this like crazy development for these kind of communities.
it's a jewel, as some people said, a kind of a jewel down here. It's a very unusual place. You feel kind of, as you drive into Starr Ranch, like you're going back through time, back into history. And it's very peaceful in this canyon. And just over the hill is the golf course, but you don't feel it, or I don't hear it. I mean, we hear the jets going over from John Wayne Airport.
So are there trails, open trails in the sanctuary?
There's no drop-in visitation. Visitation in non-COVID times is by reservation only for all those programs I was telling you about. So we do try to bring volunteers on for sure and programs, but no drop-in visitation. We have some major risks, dangers. We're the main north-south travel corridor in Bell Canyon, 4 mountain lions in our area. We have an amazing UC Davis Wildlife Research Project here right now. Only researchers are allowed on, and there are some wonderful research projects. And they're getting great videos. You should go to our Facebook page if anybody's using Facebook these days.
Oh, yeah.
There's a wonderful video that they got in one of their research corrals. They're using hair snares and motion trigger cams to try to find non-invasive ways of tracking cougars because they're in danger. Their populations are threatened, and they're going to use the DNA from the hair to match with an individual to track it rather than putting on these collars that they have to use for GPS tracking.
That's innovative.
So we have, at least 5 lions right now that are using the canyon, and it's very exciting.
Yes, and scary. So I can see why you wouldn't have people, on trails all over the place.
Yeah, just can't come out. No.
Yeah, well, then I guess we'll make arrangements if we want to come down.
You're welcome. I hope someday.
My last question, have you had any close calls with brush fires? What's your plan for that?
Well, I just gave a talk to the Audubon California board on fire prevention and management, and it was really cool talk. Somebody from Bobcat Ranch up in Northern California talked about what they do for fire management and prevention in woodlands and forests, which is very different from fire behavior and management in Southern California. And to get the legislature, the governor, CAL FIRE to grasp that has been an uphill battle that my colleagues who are activists and scientists have been fighting for a long, long time. And 99% of fires in California are human caused. And often those fires start from roads. And our preserves, my partner at the Rancho Mission Viejo Land Trust, and our preserves in South Orange County don't have major roads around them the way some of the other preserves are further north, like the Urban Ranch Conservancy, some 50,000 acres, have their roads around it, and they have repeated fires in some of their areas. It's just awful. And those repeated fires type convert our shrublands to weedy grasslands.
Right.
And so we haven't had a fire here in 41 years, knock on wood.
Mhm.
Our shrubland ecosystems face too much fire. There's this battle and debate about prescribed burning. AB 642, for any of you who are following legislation, is very scary for us down here in Southern California shrublands, because it gives CAL FIRE open use of prescribed burning, which can just destroy our shrublands that face too much fire. They're fire adapted communities, but John Keeley, one of the researchers, says that if fire intervals, but the interval between fires is 5 years or less, then it type converts to a weedy grassland and we lose our shrublands.
I think he spoke at our chapter a year ago, because this is all very familiar. And
He's wonderful. I've followed him for years.
yeah, and I think Sabrina has another fire ecologist speaking in a couple months. So yeah, that's definitely something that.
Who is it, Sabrina?
His name is Gavin Jones. He actually works for the USDA. I found him on Twitter and messaged him, and his work is mainly with owls and how they're adapting to, increased fire risks and all that.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, that's a whole topic unto itself that I would love to dig into, because we've all up here in Ventura County been affected by different fires, different big fires. I know my property has burned before. I mean, not my house, but my
Not your house.
not my house, but it was a very close call. We definitely had some damage, but the house survived. So
I have a feeling you're so progressive in Ventura. It's the same up there. The further south, LA, San Diego, Orange County Fire Authorities have online Ready, Set, Go programs. Do you know about those? That tell homeowners how to harden their homes to make them more fire resistant. They're really interesting ways you can harden your home and your defensible space 100 feet out. Sound familiar?
It sounds familiar, yes. Yeah, that's been something, a concern, because I know that, you know, fire guidelines are to clear everything around your property for, you know, hundreds of feet.
Well, to
which-
thin it,
Yeah,
you don't have to
Yeah.
clear everything. And then there's zones within the 100
Mhm.
feet, thin here, a little bit thick, they have.
yeah, and so I
guidelines.
think that is a more progressive approach.
It
Sort of like
it
scorched
really
earth.
is. It really is. And John Keeley probably told you that there's a whole different mindset for thinking about protecting structures and property than there is in what you do way out into the wildlands, into the shrublands, where there is too much fire and we need to preserve our native habitat. So it's interesting. That's the only way I don't get real upset about this. It's really interesting.
Yeah, well, and it is a new reality for us, so it's definitely on
It is.
all of our minds all the
It
time,
is.
especially this time of year.
Especially, yeah, we haven't had any big Santa Ana winds yet, but I hear it's supposed to be a normal season, so it ain't over yet.
Yeah, there's a big one started up in Santa Barbara County yesterday.
Fire.
Yeah. I haven't heard what happened with that recently, but they closed down the 101 and they had to do a bunch of evacuations in Refugio Canyon. So,
I saw that, yeah.
yeah.
They're still fighting it? Those
I think it's still
firefighters.
going. I'm sure it's still going because it was at least 1,000 acres last night. So I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it jumped to 3,000, I think, this morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, I'm sure it's still at least to some degree still
Yeah,
burning.
and that was an area that hadn't burned in like many decades. So, and it's like way, it is pretty far away from anything.
What kind of habitat is it? Do you know? Is it forest or?
I believe it's probably coastal sage scrub. And I might be completely like wrong here, but it's Refugio, it's Santa Barbara County, and it's above Refugio Canyon, and it was pushing down towards the coast. So,
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got way off topic.
that's interesting.
It was really interesting for us to hear your different programs, because we are also trying to build our own volunteer program, and we're way early on the curve. So it's really inspiring to see what you guys are doing on Starr Ranch.
Thank you.
Okay, well, is there any other questions? The few people we have left. Otherwise, I will stop the recording and I think we're done.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good evening, rest of the evening.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you speaking for us tonight.
Absolutely. Bye.